Welcome to Shadowed Tales Archive. Tonight's story is titled, Where the Roots Whisper. Let the shadows speak.
Part 1. The Fruit That Wasn't Ours. I shouldn't be writing this. I shouldn't be alive either. But some nights, when the cicadas die down and the lights flicker twice like they always do, I hear it, that low hum beneath the floorboards. A sound like wet roots pushing through drywall. And I know they remember me. My name is Dr. Lena Voss. Former botanist, tenured at Rothridge University before the incident. You probably haven't heard of it. That's the point. I've kept quiet for years. I had to. There were court orders, blood tests, signed NDAs. But nothing in those documents ever told me what to do with the guilt. Or the dreams. Or the thing growing beneath my neighbor's shed. So now I'm talking. Not to a courtroom. Not to a lab. To you. Because if you've eaten something lately that made the back of your throat tingle with sweetness like burnt sugar and blood orange, you need to know the truth. We found the grove by accident. It was late spring, and I was co-leading a field expedition into the Smoky Mountains, mapping fungal contamination in underground waterways. Typical grant work. Government-funded, lightly supervised, mostly boring. But on day 3 we followed a wrong tributary and wound up somewhere off-map, a collapsed hollow with a canopy so thick it looked like twilight at noon. And the trees, they weren't in any field guide I've ever read. Not tall, maybe 8 or 9 feet, but twisted, heavy-limbed, the kind that looked old, like they'd been growing in secret long before the US had borders. Their leaves were two-toned, green on top, a bruised pink beneath. But what caught our attention were the fruits. They didn't hang so much as dangle in clusters like glass-blown teardrops. The smell, rich, sugary like overripe nectarines left out in the heat, clung to your teeth. My assistant Junie called it sinful. We didn't touch them. Not yet. There were 6 of us on the trip. Me, Lena, 41, divorced, neurotic, and the calm one in every emergency. Junie Glass, my grad assistant, sharp as hell, always filming things for her private vlog. Dr. Tobias Wren, ethnobotanist with a coffee addiction and a god complex. Noah Riggs, logistics, ex-military, mostly kept to himself. Amari Zhao, research analyst, brilliant but skittish. And Reese Santiago, a geologist from UT, the kind of guy who brought hot sauce to breakfast. We marked GPS coordinates and took photos but agreed not to collect samples until we confirmed we weren't trespassing on sacred land. There were markings nearby, small bundles of feathers and charcoal hung from branches, sun-bleached bones arranged in a spiral near the stream. Junie thought it was a local Wicca thing. Wren, always dismissive, joked that hippie curses don't stop tenure. I said we wait. That was the last time I had a clear conscience. We camped outside the grove that night. It should have been like any other night in the field. But something was wrong. The forest never got dark, not really. Even past midnight, the canopy glowed faintly, like the trees themselves were holding onto sunlight. Reese joked it was phosphorescence. Noah said nothing. I couldn't sleep. I kept hearing it. A soft shifting under the soil like something crawling just out of sight. By morning, Wren had already taken fruit samples. He was too proud to admit it, but the juice stains on his fingers told the story. They're fine, he insisted. I ran a basic alkaloid panel, no toxins. Sweetest damn thing I've ever tasted. Noah confronted him. You touched them before we got clearance? They're just fruit. What do you think's gonna happen? I grow a tail. He laughed. No one else did. We left the site 2 days later, but Wren took half a cooler of berries with him, hidden under dried leaves in the back of the supply van. I found out weeks after the fact, during an emergency faculty meeting, because something had started happening back at the greenhouse. 3 of our interns, healthy, no known mental health issues, had been found eating soil. Not just tasting it, gorging. One girl had broken into the compost unit at night and was found unconscious, her hands bloody from digging through the mulch. They all had one thing in common. They'd been present at Wren's private tasting party. No press release. No quarantine. Just internal memos and a gentle leave of absence for the victims. Junie came to my office shaking. "Lena," she whispered, I think there's something inside me." She didn't mean it metaphorically. Part 2. Junie's Roots. At first, I thought Junie meant it the way we all do when we say we feel off. I looked her up and down, expecting rashes, shaking, anything. But she was still the same. Same oversized hoodie, same bitten down nails, same black nail polish chipping at the edges. "I'm not sick," she said. "It's not the flu. It's something else." "Okay," I said, trying to keep my voice steady. "Tell me what you're feeling." She swallowed hard. "Like itching. Under the skin. In my lower back. And sometimes when I'm in the shower, I feel like there's something moving. Inside me. Like roots. Just wriggling around." I didn't laugh. I wish I had. Instead, I asked her to come with me to the campus clinic. She refused. "I'm not crazy," she snapped. "They'll say it's stress or PTSD or some girl shit diagnosis. They won't believe me. But you saw those trees too." She wasn't wrong. That night, I stayed late in the greenhouse, pretending to catalog leaf samples. What I was really doing was digging through Ren's locker. I found 2 things. A digital recorder with 3 files, all unnamed. A dried fruit core in a Ziploc with visible teeth marks. I didn't press play. Not yet. Instead, I walked through the greenhouse alone. Something was wrong with the air. It smelled like warm dirt and sugar. A smell I'd only experienced in that grove. And the witch fruit saplings, the ones we weren't even supposed to have, they were thriving. Too well. The leaves had gone from pale to vibrant in days. One had begun flowering. The vines near its base pulsed ever so slightly. I leaned in closer. The soil was breathing. Junie stopped coming to class. Her dorm room stayed dark for 3 days. Campus security eventually let me in since I was her advisor. What I found? God. The windows were blacked out with garbage bags. The entire room smelled like rot and vinegar. On her bed, piles of torn-up notebook pages, scribbled with nonsense phrases over and over. "The skin isn't enough. We feed what feeds us. She waits in the loam." And on the floor, beneath a damp towel, was a heap of soil. Just a mound of black dirt. Rich, wet, and reeking. That's where we found Junie, curled up in the dirt, her hoodie pulled over her face. Still breathing. Barely. They took her to St. Agatha's psych ward under involuntary evaluation. I tried to visit. She wouldn't see me. But 2 days later I got an envelope. No return address. No stamp. Just my name in ballpoint pen. Inside was a single Polaroid. Blurry. Grayscale. A photo of someone, Junie I think, curled fetal in a garden bed. And growing out of her spine was a pink-veined stem, thick and wet, with tiny rootlets sprouting down her back like veins. I finally listened to Ren's recordings. The first was from the day he stole the berries. You could hear him chewing. Tastes like strawberries dipped in warm honey. I think it's better than heroin. Not that I'd know. The second was recorded late at night. His voice was slower, distant. I tried to stop eating them, but they hum to me. When the lights are off, I keep them in a sealed drawer, but I hear the buzzing, like cicadas under glass. Then the third recording. Just 6 minutes of wet chewing. No words. Just dirt and saliva and heavy breathing. That was when I stopped pretending this was a fungus or parasite. This wasn't biological. It was intentional. I started digging. Not in soil, in history. Ren had mentioned the region's name once. Red Mother Hollow. A deep-cut ravine about 15 miles from where we set camp, used centuries ago by escaped Appalachian spiritual sects, old blood cults, pre-Christian. The library at Rothridge had a box of unindexed records. Colonial journals, mostly. And in one brittle, unbound ledger from 1791, I found a passage. "And the woman of the hollow spake to me, her hands full of fruit not made for men." She called them blood kind, and those who eat must plant. Their bodies the nursery, their bones the ash, their wombs the ground. It was signed by Ezekiel Lowe, a preacher turned exile, hanged later that year for apostasy and filthcraft. I found 3 other mentions of fruit with pink-veined leaves, all from the same region. In each, the pattern was the same: discovery, obsession, bodily craving, then disappearance. People vanished. So did the trees, until someone found them again. I confronted Wren. His apartment smelled like mildew and sweet decay. The same smell as the grove. He was thinner. Well, his hands were covered in soil up to the wrist. I asked him if he'd been eating it. No, he said, then paused. But it's been eating me. That night, Reese Santiago went missing. He'd called Noah, ranting about worms under his skin and the roots whispering Latin in his dreams. When campus police broke into his apartment, they found his clothes neatly folded in the bathtub and a shallow pit in the backyard. Reese was never found. But 5 days later, a sapling sprouted from that same patch of earth. Leaves pink beneath, and wet with something darker than dew. Part 3. Those who remember the hollow. The next few days moved like a fever dream. Amari Zhao stopped coming to the lab. No texts, no voicemails, just silence. I found out from one of her roommates that she'd dropped out, left campus in the middle of the night, leaving behind her phone and all her clothes. She'd been different lately, they said. Obsessive. Kept muttering about cleansing and the roots beneath her ribs. The last thing she wrote, apparently, was a note left taped to the microwave. I won't become compost. At this point, 5 people from our original expedition were missing, hospitalized, or no longer coherent. I called Noah. Out of everyone, he seemed like the only one holding it together, ex-military, emotionally sealed like a vault. But when I heard his voice, it was shaking. They're in the drains now, he whispered. I can hear them, Lena. I left the shower running last night and the sound turned wet. Not like water. Like mouths. He'd started sleeping with the lights on. Kept a bottle of whiskey in every room. Refused to walk barefoot even indoors. When I asked him why, he said, "Roots look like veins if you're not paying attention." That was when the news blackout began. I tried to submit a report to the CDC, carefully worded, non-hysterical, full of data. I even sent blood work samples through a medical contact in Atlanta. But the report disappeared. I mean vanished. No confirmation. No receipt. No follow-up. When I tried to resend it, the CDC's portal redirected me to a dead link message. My contact's number? Disconnected. Then came the leak. An article appeared on a fringe conspiracy site titled Morgellons 2.0, The Dirt Eaters of Appalachia. It was full of misinformation, called the whole thing a hoax, blamed climate change, even referenced alien fungi. Most people laughed. The rest forgot. But the people who didn't forget, those who had tasted the fruit, they were changing. I reviewed campus surveillance footage from the last week. It was subtle, but it was there. The greenhouse staff stopped wearing gloves. Some had dirt under their fingernails that never seemed to wash out. One tech assistant, a guy named Carl with a chin piercing, was seen on camera crouched in greenhouse plot 7, gently rocking a seedling like it was a child. His mouth was moving, but there was no audio. We checked the soil afterward. It was laced with blood. I went to see Junie again. By now, she was in a high-security wing of St. Agatha's. No visitors allowed. But I pulled some strings, lied my way in under the guise of academic oversight. She was worse. Her eyes were jaundiced and her skin, where it had once been pale, had a faint, flushed greenish tint, like bruised mint leaves. She kept scratching her stomach, muttering to herself. I sat down beside her. She didn't look at me. Instead, she said in a voice not fully her own, "She's waking up, Dr. Voss. The one who whispers beneath the hollow. You fed her. You gave her a path. Later that night, I drove to the supply warehouse where Wren had stored the original saplings. It had been locked since the university quietly decommissioned the research, but I still had my keys. Inside, under plastic tarps and rusting fluorescent lights, stood over 30 planters, each filled with those strange pulsing leaf trees. And at the center of the warehouse, on a pedestal of stacked soil bags, was something I hadn't expected to see. A statue, roughly carved from rotted wood, shaped like a woman, faceless, with vines wrapping up her legs and disappearing into her open abdomen. Where the stomach should have been, there was a hollow, and inside it, dry seeds. They looked like teeth. There was a word scratched beneath the statue over and over: Mathanera. I brought the name to an old contact of mine, a mythographer and translator named Petra Harrow. She worked with Appalachian folklore and indigenous subcultures, including suppressed beliefs from escaped 18th century sects. She stared at the photo for a long time. Then she asked me very calmly if I had eaten anything from the hollow. I told her no, then asked, "What does the name mean?" She typed silently for nearly an hour before answering. Mathanera is a composite. Mathu, archaic root of mother, in a dialect linked to pre-colonial woodland tribes. Nera, derived from Latin nerere, meaning to spin, but in folklore texts it was twisted to mean to bind. Petra leaned in close. It translates, roughly, to the binding mother. She doesn't just feed on bodies. She grows through bloodlines, through generations. The first fruits are just the beginning. By the end of that week, 3 more students disappeared. Security found shallow graves near the compost facility. No bodies, just clothes, hair, and an eerie layer of pink-veined roots growing in the shape of a rib cage. The university issued a press release. Botanical contamination unrelated to human activity. Controlled incident. Bullshit. But the world kept spinning. That's when I started drinking. Heavily. Not to cope. To survive. Junie's words kept circling back. She waits in the loam. I don't know why alcohol works. Maybe it kills the seed coating. Maybe it dulls the root's instinct. Or maybe the binding mother finds drunk hosts undesirable. All I know is this: everyone who stopped drinking started digging. Part 4. The nursery beneath our feet. The dream started 2 nights after Petra's warning. I was in the hollow again, but it wasn't the same place. The trees were taller, breathing, their leaves twitching like sleeping fingers. The sky overhead was violet black, swarming with clouds that moved like they were underwater. In the center of the grove, a woman knelt, skin gray, hair like tangled vines, mouth a gaping root knot split across her chest. She held something in her hands. My own heart, still beating. When I woke up, there was dirt under my fingernails, and I hadn't been outside in 3 days. Noah called just after sunrise. He'd been camping out in one of the remote faculty cabins. Off-grid, no Wi-Fi, one-way road. "I'm out," he said. "I've seen enough horror for 2 lifetimes. I'm burning everything." I asked him what everything meant. He told me he'd dug up the original soil samples we brought back from Red Mother Hollow. And they weren't just soil anymore. There's movement. Tiny white rootlings like nerves. They retract when light hits them. But they track movement. I told him to wait. I drive out to him. He paused. "No. You don't want to see what I found under the lab floor." Then he hung up. I drove out anyway. The road to the cabin was mostly dirt, surrounded by pines and silence. No other cars. Just crows watching from sagging telephone wires. Noah's truck was still there. His cabin smelled like scorched bark and kerosene. Burn marks across the floor, the mattress half melted. There was a shovel leaning against the sink, and muddy footprints leading through the back door. I followed them. Behind the cabin, about 20 feet into the woods, was a tarp-covered pit. The edges were lined with flickering citronella torches. I pulled back the cover. What I saw is something I've never been able to say out loud. But I'll write it now in case I don't have time later. The hole was about 6 feet deep, 10 feet wide. At the bottom, human bones. No flesh, no clothing. Just rib cages, spinal columns, jaws still clenched. All of them positioned face down, arms wrapped around themselves. And growing from their backs, twisting upward, were saplings, pink-veined, slick with moisture. A few had already flowered. Noah had planted them like a garden. He tagged each one. Names: Amari, Reese, Junie, and one tagged me. Noah was nowhere to be found. Just a half-empty bottle of rye and a note pinned to a birch tree with a hunting knife. I couldn't let her hatch inside me. I made myself too sour to swallow. Burn the nursery. Bury the roots. Don't look at her face. I never saw him again. I returned to Rothridge campus at dusk. The greenhouse complex was wrong. The security lights flickered in sync, as if something was interfering with the electrical current. A strange vibration hummed under my shoes, like a subwoofer turned too low. Inside it was warm, unnaturally warm. The witchberry trees had grown, not inches, feet. Their trunks split and rejoined, forming spiral lattices. Their roots cracked through concrete, curling over lab equipment like fingers gripping tools. There were pods now, egg-shaped growths hanging from vines. Some pulsed, others were open. And beneath one of the benches, I saw what had become of Maggie Hirschbaum. She was still alive, barely. Her eyes were rolled back and her body was fused to the soil, not buried but entwined. Roots had threaded through her skin like veins, keeping her in place. A flower bloomed from her throat. She made no sound, except her breath. It sounded like whispering, not in English, not in any language I knew, but I understood it anyway. We are fed. We are womb. We are seed. You are next. I stumbled back, nearly vomiting, and knocked over a planter. Inside was a partially developed sapling, but its trunk wasn't wood. It was spinal cord. Human. Pinkish white, wet. And the leaves grew straight from what looked like fingers fused together in prayer. I fled. Outside, campus security had arrived. I flagged them down, desperate for help. But when one of them stepped out of the cart, I saw it. He wasn't blinking. His eyes were glassy, with thin red veins spidering toward the corners. His boots were caked with the same soil I'd seen in the greenhouse. He tilted his head. "Dr. Voss," he said. "The binding mother thanks you for tending the nursery." Then he smiled, and something wriggled between his teeth. I ran. I don't remember how I made it home, but I locked every door, turned off every light, and burned the only witch fruit sample I'd kept in my freezer. The smell filled the apartment. Sweet, heavy, alive. But I watched it burn. I didn't look away. That was 3 weeks ago. Since then I've kept quiet. I drink whiskey before every meal. I haven't eaten anything raw. I salt my floors. But I know this won't last. Because last night I woke up with blood under my toenails. And a single leaf growing from the base of my spine. Part 5. The last one she let go. The leaf was gone when I woke up. No blood. No bruising. No trace. But I remembered it. I remembered its wet texture, the way it pulsed when I touched it in the mirror, like it was breathing. I still don't know if it was real. But I started keeping a scalpel beside the bed after that. I didn't go back to the university. I didn't need to. The binding mother had moved beyond Rothridge. I started noticing signs in the city. Small things. A maintenance worker squatting beside a tree planter, chewing soil. A woman in the checkout line rubbing her hands raw and mumbling about the smell of seed rot. A teenage boy live streaming from a backyard garden in Mississippi, showing a fruit that looked exactly like the witchberry. He laughed, ate it on camera. Within an hour, the video was deleted. His account scrubbed. But not before I downloaded it. I sent it to Petra Harrow with the message, "It's spreading." She replied 2 hours later with a name and an address. There was one other before. A man named Caleb Monroe, North Vermont. Survived the first bloom in '88. Last known living host who broke free. It took 3 days and 2 fake credentials to get through to him. He lived in a fortified cabin deep in the Green Mountains, off a dirt trail you couldn't find on GPS, steel grates on the windows, salt rings at every doorway, a crucifix above the fireplace, upside down, not religious, protective. He let me in without a word, just pointed to the floor. Take your shoes off. She rides in dirt. His face was leathery, eyes sunken but alert. A man who'd seen too much and learned not to flinch at shadows. He poured us both bourbon before I even spoke. I told him everything. He listened. Then finally he said, "You brought her back, didn't you?" Caleb had been 21 in 1988, working construction in eastern Kentucky. He and his team found a buried root cluster under a landslide site, half fossilized but alive. They joked it looked like a tumor made of wood. A week later, one man was dead, another missing. Caleb had started experiencing hallucinations, dreams of a woman made of ash and vines, whispering nursery rhymes in a language he didn't know but couldn't forget. She tried to grow through me, he said, but I burned it inside. When I asked how, he reached into a drawer and pulled out an old hip flask. Liquor helps, but it was the fire that stopped her. Real fire. Pain. That's the only thing she doesn't know. Pain. Asked why. His answer chilled me. Because she's not from here. Not from our world. She's from somewhere that never had to hurt to survive. So she doesn't understand it. Can't defend against it. You want to stop her? Make her bleed. He showed me the scars across his chest. 5 of them deep and jagged. Cut them out. Every root. Every time she tried to grow back. I did what no seed expects. I rejected the mother. He gave me a small box before I left. Inside, a vial of thick, dark resin and a warning. That's from the original grove. Burn it. You'll see her. But be ready. Back at my apartment, I locked the door, drew every blind, and lit 6 candles in a circle on the floor. I unscrewed the vial. The resin smelled like blood and pine needles and burnt teeth. I poured it into a ceramic bowl and set it alight. The smoke that rose was black and wet. It curled like it had weight. Within seconds, my head swam and the walls bent inward like a collapsing lung. And then she appeared. Not physically. Not in full. Just her voice. Low, rich, layered with hundreds of mouths, childlike and ancient. You broke the soil, little root. You fled the cradle. But I remember your scent. Come back. I'll make it quiet again. The candlelight flickered red. The walls rippled. And in the center of the room, something began growing. A stalk sprouting from the floorboards. It cracked through varnish and concrete, swaying toward me like it smelled my fear. I grabbed the scalpel. No hesitation. I sliced open my left palm and flung the blood into the stalk. It screamed. Not aloud, not in a way ears could hear, but deep in the bones, in the soul's teeth. Like every cell in me flinched at once. The stalk withered instantly, turning black and curling like burned paper. Then silence. The fire went out, and I was alone. I knew then that Caleb was right. Pain, fire, blood. These were the weapons she couldn't twist. She grew through peace, through warmth, through trust. Through the parts of us that nurture. To fight her, I had to become what she wasn't. A destroyer. But something had changed in me. When I looked in the mirror that night, the whites of my eyes had a faint pink hue. And when I tilted my head just right, I could hear something humming, deep in the back of my skull. Part 6. The Brood Chamber. I didn't sleep that night. Even after the hallucination, or vision, or whatever it was, burned itself out, I sat in the center of my apartment, blood still drying on my palm, the air reeking of resin smoke. The silence felt wrong, like a stage waiting for the next act. By morning I'd made my decision. I was going back to Rothridge. Not to study. Not to run. To burn it down. The greenhouse facility had been fenced off after the last incident. A polite sign read, "Temporarily closed for biohazard decontamination. Authorized personnel only." The gate was padlocked. Cameras watched the front, but the back perimeter ran along a narrow creek bed. At 4:23 a.m., I slipped under the fence wearing hospital scrubs, gloves, and a hoodie soaked in vinegar, a trick Caleb taught me. The roots hated acid. Inside, the air felt alive. Not metaphorically. I mean, it pulsed, slow and rhythmic like lungs. The ground was warm. The walls were sweating. The witchberry trees had fully matured, their bark splitting open in knots that resembled mouths. Thick, meaty leaves brushed against my skin as I moved between rows. And beneath the soil, I could hear them whispering, "Not yet time. Wait for sun. Then she comes. Then we run." I didn't know where I was going. Not exactly. But something kept pulling me toward Unit C, the oldest greenhouse, abandoned years before we ever started using the facility. Its door was sealed shut. No lights. Cobweb. But the lock was rusted through. I kicked it in. Inside, a stairwell. I hadn't known there was a basement. The steps were narrow, choked with vines and broken lights. Each one groaned under my weight like the building itself wanted me gone. The smell changed as I descended, from mulch and rot to something sour, almost metallic. And then the chamber opened. It wasn't man-made. Not entirely. The concrete gave way to earth, walls slick with roots, the ceiling hung with fruiting bodies like bat cocoons. Pink and green and dripping. In the center of the chamber was a pit, circular and lined with bones. Real ones. The bones weren't buried. They were woven, ribs interlaced like baskets, skulls pressed together in patterns. And in the pit's center, something monstrous. Broodsack. That's the only word that fits. A massive, swollen mass of fleshy tendrils, throbbing with each pulse of the room. From its base, umbilical roots stretched outward, penetrating the earth, and the walls, and maybe even the rest of the campus. It was birthing something. Dozens of egg-sized pods dangled from its sides. Some were closed. Others had burst open, leaking a black sap that hissed on contact with air. And I saw movement. In the far corner. It was Amari Zhao. Still alive. Or close enough. She was kneeling before the brood sack, her arms outstretched, vines threaded through her veins like tubing. Her eyes glowed faintly pink. She turned toward me slowly. "She's almost ready," Amari said. "The bloom is soon. We're just the soil." I called her name. Tried to reach her. For a moment, something flickered in her face. Recognition. Bang. Then it passed. "You left us, Lena. You salted the earth. But the mother finds cracks." She turned back to the sack and began to hum. I pulled the flask from my jacket, the one Caleb gave me, poured the rest of the resin onto the floor around the pit and struck a match. It caught fast. Too fast. Flames licked the walls, roots recoiled, and the brood sack screamed. So did Amari. She collapsed, clutching her stomach, black sap pouring from her nose. The tendrils flailed, some reaching for me, others writhing into the fire. I backed away, arm raised, coughing. My skin blistered from the heat. But I didn't stop. I threw every match I had into that pit and ran. The explosion came just as I hit the upper hall. A low whump like a muffled thunderclap. Smoke poured from the vents. Lights popped in sequence like dominoes. The greenhouse lit up from the inside, not orange but green. Sickly. Pulsing. And then, silence. I collapsed in the creek outside, soaked, burned, shaking. And smiling. For the first time in months I felt quiet. Until the crows came. Dozens of them, silent, all facing the greenhouse. And then one opened its beak. But it didn't caw. It spoke. "We remember. We root. We rise." I fled that town by dawn. Petra met me in an abandoned rest stop in Pennsylvania 2 nights later. She looked older. Her hair grayer. Her eyes wild. "I felt it," she said. "The rupture." I nodded. "It's dead." She didn't answer. Instead, she reached into her bag and pulled out a mason jar. Inside, a sapling, pink-veined, already flowering. "It's not over," she said softly. "You killed the bloom, not the seed." Part 7. The Spreading Season. We spent the next 5 weeks on the road. Petra had a list. Names, dates, locations. All from obscure journals and oral histories she'd compiled over decades, most of which had been dismissed as hallucinations, curses, or local folklore. But every single one had a pattern. Sudden disappearances, garden soil found inside homes, victims found with faint root-like scarring on their spines. From rural Louisiana to inland Maine, from the outskirts of Edinburgh to a closed botanical park in Nagano Prefecture, the signs were all there. She hadn't just survived the binding mother. She had tracked her. "It's not a species," Petra told me one night as we camped near a flooded orchard in Vermont. "It's a system, a network." We kept thinking of her like a god or a parasite or a plant. But she's all of them. She's what happens when belief, biology, and loneliness rot together long enough. I stirred the fire. "She doesn't need to infect the world," Petra continued. "Just the soil. Once it's touched, she waits. She listens. She can take years, even centuries. And when she finds someone weak, empty, aching, she blooms," I finished. We reached the quarantine site outside Calais, Maine on a gray Tuesday. It looked ordinary. An abandoned roadside plant nursery. Half of it had burned years ago. But the greenhouse on the far end was still standing, and sealed shut with barbed wire and old CDC tape that had faded to white. A nearby billboard still hung overhead, "Grow your joy here." Irony is never subtle in horror stories. We snuck in through the back fence after midnight. Inside, nothing. At first. Then Petra pointed to the floor. Faint scratch marks in the dust. A phrase repeated again and again, carved with what looked like fingernails. "She waits in the womb of the world." Then a trapdoor. The chamber beneath wasn't as elaborate as Rothridge, just a crude cellar dug into loam and stone. But the smell hit me instantly. Sweet. What? Fungal. And in the corner, wrapped in burlap and breathing, yes, breathing, was a sapling. This one was different. Its leaves were black beneath, veined not in pink but gold. Petra knelt beside it, whispering in a language I didn't recognize. A lullaby, maybe. She reached out. I stopped her. "Don't," I said. Her hand trembled. "This one's not mother," she whispered. "It's daughter. We burned it. Used gasoline and an old road flare. It didn't scream like the brood sack had. But I swear the wind changed. For hours after, it smelled like burnt milk and metal." That night, Petra confessed something she hadn't told me. The seeds didn't come from Red Hollow. Not originally. They were found in an asteroid fragment, recovered near Bolivia in 1946. I blinked. "You're saying she's alien?" She shook her head. "No. I'm saying she's not from here. But she's always been here. She didn't invade. She was invited." Back on the road, I checked the news. Quietly. There were reports of soil-related fungal outbreaks in a farm town in Indiana. A food recall in Ontario due to mutant fruit discoloration. A missing person report from an Arkansas university. Biology student gone missing, found days later buried up to her chest, smiling. None of it made national news. But I recognized the pattern. And I recognized the smell. Somewhere outside Harrisburg, Petra asked the question we'd both been avoiding. What if we can't stop it? I didn't answer. So she rephrased it. What if survival means surrender? I turned to her. You mean join her? She didn't look away. She doesn't kill everyone. Some she absorbs, keeps alive, transforms. I've read testimonies from people who became part of her and felt peace. My skin crawled. Like Amari? Petra nodded. But there was no pain, no fear, just silence. That night, I dreamed of the hollow again. But it was me in the pit this time. Kneeling, arms open, soil dripping from my mouth like honey. My spine cracked open and a bloom sprouted from it, tall and red and crowned with gold. She kissed my forehead, whispered, "You were always meant to be soil." I woke up screaming. Petra didn't wake up at all. I found her in her sleeping bag, cold and rigid. No sign of struggle. No wounds. Just gone. But in her left palm was a note, scrawled in charcoal. "She grows where the silence begins." I let her in. I'm not afraid anymore. And beneath her sleeping bag, the grass was green. Too green. I buried Petra in the orchard. Salted the soil. Burned sage. Whispered old words I didn't believe in. But as I left, a single shoot pierced the soil where her ribcage would have been. It bent toward the sun. Back in my car, I found something lodged in the air vent. A folded note wrapped around a seed. The note said, "One last choice, grow or burn." Part 8. The soil remembers. I didn't drive home. Didn't check in. Didn't run. I went straight back to the hollow. Red Mother Hollow. Where it all began. Where she first touched us. The forest looked different this time. Not overgrown, tended. Like someone or something had been pruning it. The path was clearer. The air warmer. The scent of ripe fruit clung to my skin like perfume. And in the center, the grove stood as it had all those months ago, still, breathing, waiting. The trees bent slightly as I passed, like they were acknowledging me. I didn't hesitate. I dug a hole, 6 feet deep, just like the others. I laid down in it, the cold soil pressing against my spine, the weight of the earth hugging my ribs. Then I took out the seed, the one Petra left me, smooth, warm, still pulsing faintly like a tiny heart. I held it above my chest and swallowed it. The pain wasn't physical, not at first. It started as sound, a low vibration like the hum of power lines spreading through my teeth into my bones. My skin itched, then burned. My breath came shallow, and when I closed my eyes, she was there, the binding mother, not as a woman, not exactly, but as a shape, a presence taking form only where my mind let it. 1,000 arms made of bark and sinew, a voice layered in every language I'd ever known, a face without eyes, mouth blooming like a flower of meat. You came back. You buried yourself. You know what you are now. I tried to speak, but dirt filled my throat. Still I thought, why me? She answered without asking. Because you split the seed. Because you bled. Because you feared me and still stayed. She showed me things then. The world. Not as it was, but as it would be. Cities replaced with vertical gardens. People tethered to roots, humming softly in bliss. Pain gone. Hunger gone. Choice gone. Everyone was part of the same song. A green, silent, endless lullaby. I am not death, she said. I am after. She offered me the bloom. Not destruction. Not horror. Belonging. All I had to do was stop fighting. Lay still. Let go. Grow. And I almost did. God help me, I almost did. But then I saw Junie. In my mind. Her face. Her voice. The way she laughed when she was nervous. The way she said sinful when she tasted the fruit. The way she clawed at her stomach in terror. And I remembered, this wasn't peace. This was silence with teeth. I bit my tongue. Art. The pain snapped the vision. I screamed and the sound tore the space around me like paper. Her arms recoiled. The soil cracked. Light spilled in from somewhere, burning white and fierce. And I said one word. No. Everything collapsed. The trees shook. The roots writhed. The sky tore open like it had been painted on fabric. I scrambled out of the grave, coughing, bleeding, blind from the light. The seed ejected from my throat, steaming. The hollow howled, then fell silent. I don't remember how I got out, or how long I walked, or who found me. I woke up in a hospital in Virginia. No ID, no memory, no name, Just a note in my pocket, written in my own handwriting. Don't eat the fruit. Don't trust the soil. Don't forget who you are. L.V. It's been 2 months. They think I'm delusional. Say I have dissociative trauma, fugue states, invented memories. They're probably right. I'm not the same. I feel her sometimes, brushing the edge of my thoughts like a breeze you can't explain. She's quieter now, but not gone. Sometimes I wake up to find soil under my fingernails again. Sometimes I hear Junie's voice in static, or Petra's in the wind, or my own humming lullabies in the bathroom mirror. And once, just once, I caught my reflection blinking out of sync. But I'm still fighting. I haven't eaten fruit in 63 days. I drink scotch before every meal. I wear salt in my boots and keep fire close. Because I know she's still growing. Not just in forests, but in minds, in choices, in surrender. This is my testimony, my confession, my warning. If you found this recording, if you've tasted something sweet that doesn't belong, if the dirt starts calling you by name, run, fight, burn, or bury yourself in bloom. The soil will always remember, but you don't have to join it. Not yet.
And that was tonight's tale from the Shadowed Tales archive. If it left a mark on your mind, if the silence feels heavier now, then the story did what it was meant to do. Don't forget to like, subscribe, and share the darkness. New stories are always on their way. Until then, keep the lights low and the doors locked.